The earth is really old, but how old? And what are those verses that teach that the earth is old? The earth is very old, about 6,000 years old. We think of a 100-year-old person as old, and yet the earth is far older than that. Even when it was only 1,500 years old, it was still far older than any living person. But how old is old? One of the most important principles of biblical interpretation is to interpret the general in light on the specific, the unclear in light of the clear. Passages like Exodus 20:11 indicate that God created in 6 days, and passages like Genesis 5 give the time span between the patriarchs. This puts the incarnation of Christ about 4,000 years after creation. Passages like 2 Peter 2:5 do mention the ancient world, but context shows this is referring to a world of mankind that was destroyed by the flood. The event occurred over 2,000 years before this passage was written, which is very ancient, but not millions of years ago. Likewise, Proverbs 8:22 does describe works of old, but not specify how old. The same Hebrew word is used to describe the ancient mountains in Deuteronomy 33:15. But this passage does not specify how old, nor does it remotely suggest millions of years. The same word is used in Nehemiah 12:46 to refer to the ancient times of David and Asaph. David indeed lived a long time ago, but clearly they did not live millions of years ago. Another Hebrew word often translated as of old is olam. The word has a range of meanings. It can even mean everlasting when referring to future events. But how old is old? The hills are said to be old, ancient, using this word in Genesis 49:26 and in Deuteronomy 33:15. Does this mean they must be millions of years old? This cannot be the case because the same word is used to describe ancient human activity, such as in Isaiah, Joshua, Psalms, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Amos, Malachi. Mankind is ancient, thousands of years old. However, we all agree that humanity has not been around for millions of years. Unless you're an evolutionist, I guess. God had the power to instantly create an earth that was already formed and full of life. But instead he chose to work over time for 6 days. He then rested a day. He did this as a pattern for us. There is no evil during the creation week. In every step when God evaluated his work, it was good. Genesis 1 verse 4, 10, 12, 18, and 23. And finally, when he finishes everything, he saw that it was very good in Genesis 1:30. Because it's not only good, but also complete. So when did Satan rebel? The Bible does not provide the exact date, but it does give us some boundaries on when the event must have occurred. The fall of Satan must have occurred after day 6 of the creation week. Why? In Genesis 1:31, on the 6th day, God looked at everything he had made, and behold, it was very good. Since Satan is part of God's creation, it follows that Satan was also very good at that point and therefore had not fallen. Furthermore, the fall of Satan must have occurred before he tempted Eve in Genesis chapter 3, since he deceived and lied to her in Genesis 3:4. I already pretty much covered all that before. We don't have an exact date when Satan fell. But if he was a part of the 6 days of creation, he had to be created somewhere in that process. not what some believe, that he might be millions, if not tens of millions, and hundreds of millions of years old. No proof of that. That's just a Christian theory. Just as some Christians have adopted that the earth and the universe is possibly hundreds or billions of years old. And that's how this whole section of this series started, with the gap theory. And I've been pointing out that there's plenty of evidence for a young universe, a young earth, a young world. I'm going to read to you a few of the things that we already covered. But in the next program or two, I want to just highlight some areas more than others so we can move along in this section of this part of the series, because we dwelled on it long enough and we need to get to a different place. So in review, what is some of the evidence for a young world? Well, let's just start listing them. Marked down as number 1, galaxies wind themselves up too fast, which we already covered. The stars of our own galaxy, the Milky Way, rotate about the galactic center with different speeds, their inner ones rotating faster than the outer ones. The observed rotation speeds are so fast that if our galaxy was more than a few hundred million years old, it would be a featureless disk of stars instead of its present spiral shape. Yet our galaxy is supposed to be at least 10 billion years old. Evolutionists call this the winding up dilemma, which they have known about for 50 years. They have devised many theories to try to explain it, each one falling after a brief period of popularity. The same winding up dilemma also applies to other galaxies. For the last few decades, the favorite attempt to resolve the puzzle has been a complex theory called density waves. The theory has conceptual problems, has to be arbitrarily and very finely tuned, and has been called into serious question by the Hubble Space Telescope's discovery of very detailed spiral structure in the central hub of the Whirlpool Galaxy M51. That's number 1. Number 2, which we already covered, too few supernova remnants. There's just not enough of them for a billions and billions of year old universe. According to astronomical observations, galaxies like our own experience about one supernova, a violently exploding star, every 25 years. The gas and dust remnants from such explosions, like the Crab Nebula, expand outward rapidly and should remain visible for over 1 million years. Yet the nearby parts of our galaxy in which we could observe such gas and dust shells contain only about 200 supernova remnants. And that 200 number is consistent with only about no more than 7,000 years of supernovas. Point number 2. Point number 3. Comets disintegrate too quickly. According to evolutionary theory, comets are supposed to be the same age as the solar system, about 5 billion years. Yet each time a comet orbits close to the sun, it loses so much of its material that it could not survive much longer than about 100,000 years. Many comets have typical ages of less than 10,000 years. Evolutionists explain this discrepancy by assuming that comets, or assuming A, comets come from an unobserved spherical Oort cloud, O-R-T cloud, well beyond the orbit of Pluto system. And B, improbable gravitational interactions with infrequently passing stars often knock comets into the solar system. And C, other improbable interactions with planets slow down the incoming comets often enough to account for the hundreds of comets observed. So far, none of these assumptions has been substantiated either by observations or realistic calculations. Lately, there has been much talk of a Kuiper belt, a disk of supposed comet sources lying in the plane of the solar system just out the orbit of Pluto. Some asteroid-sized bodies of ice exist in that location, but they do not solve evolution's problem, since, according to evolutionary theories, the Kuiper belt would quickly become exhausted if there were no Oort cloud to supply it. That's problem number 3. Let's look at number 4. Now, some of these you could research on your own. The ones I'm not going to dwell on. There's plenty of material out there if you're that interested. But I want to move, like I said, to a place in this part of this section of this series. So I'm just going to briefly read about these and then move on. Number 4, not enough mud on the seafloor. Write that down. Each year, water and winds erode about 20 billion tons of dirt and rock from the continents and deposit in the ocean. This material accumulates as loose sediment on the hard, basaltic, lava-formed rock of the ocean floor. The average depth of all the sediment in the ocean is less than 400 meters. The main way known to remove the sediment from the ocean floor is by plate tectonic subduction. That is, seafloor slides slowly a few centimeters a year beneath the continents, taking some sediment with it. According to secular scientific literature, the process presently removes only 1 billion tons per year. As far as anyone knows, the other 19 billion tons per year simply accumulate. At that rate, erosion would deposit the present mass of sediment in less than 12 million years. Yet, according to evolutionary theory, erosion and plate subduction has been going on as long as the oceans have existed, an alleged 3 billion years. If that were so, the rates above imply that the oceans would be massively choked with sediment dozens of kilometers deep. An alternative explanation is that the erosion from the waters of the Genesis flood running off continents deposit the present amount of sediment with a short time about 5,000 years ago. A lot of what ifs. And I'm just going to name you about a dozen of them. Not tonight, but by the time I'm done, the next time, hopefully, I'll lay out about a dozen. And that's just some of them. There are too many what ifs, folks, that they can't explain away. They're running out of their, what I call excuse theories, too, that they think are providing answers, which more rapidly now than 20 or 30 years ago are being disproven as fast as they come up with them. Let's move on to problem number 5, which is not enough sodium in the sea. Every year, rivers and other sources dump over 400 million tons of sodium into the ocean. Only 27% of this sodium manage to get back out of the sea each year. As far as anyone knows, the remainder simply accumulates in the ocean. If the sea had no sodium to start with, it would have accumulated its present amount in less than 42 million years at today's input and output rates. This is much less than the evolutionary age of the ocean, 3 billion years. The usual reply to this discrepancy is that past sodium inputs must have been less and outputs greater. However, calculations that are generous as possible to evolutionary scenarios still give a maximum age of only 62 million years. Calculations for many other seawater elements give much younger ages for the ocean. Now, hopefully you wrote those down. Galaxies wind themselves up too fast. Problem number 1. Too few supernova remnants. Problem number 2. Number 3, the comets are disintegrating too quickly. 4, not enough mud on the seafloor. And 5, not enough sodium in the sea. And we're just beginning. There's more. They're having a hard time explaining away because their theories don't pan out. And that's all they are theories. That this earth is a young earth. This universe is not that old. The things created inside this universe points to a young universe with young elements inside the universe that we can observe. So what does that mean? What does that tell us? God's Word has provided the answers, has provided a timeline. It's just human beings have been brainwashed to believe that God's Word is nothing but a fantasy. Fictionist writings by creative human beings that want to control man's thoughts to pursue their own belief systems in whatever religion they were establishing. Well, as far as I'm concerned, these scientists have created their own religion based on nothing but fallacies, theories that are constantly being disproven as the years go by. And like I said earlier, as soon as they come up with another one, it doesn't take very long now to discredit it. They don't have the answers. They just keep peddling their false ideas to discredit the God we serve. Well, the universe doesn't lie. What God created doesn't lie. In none of the ages that man has put on, what we see in this universe adds up. So our only option then, in my opinion, is go to God's Word and see what He says about it. And He doesn't say it's millions of years old. The gap theory is just another Christian science fiction theory that I even fell for in my early years. But as I started digging in, especially the last good while now, many years, I finally had to come to the conclusion that if it's wrong, I had to toss it out with a lot of other Christian science fiction nonsense that I was led to believe to be true. So that's why I decided to go on a search mission to find the truth. And what I have found, I'm now sharing with you. And I'm incorporating that into the Last Day series. Because I wanted to set a timeline for the end. But to get to the end, we have to look at the beginning. And that's where we're at right now. And this beginning didn't happen millions, hundreds of millions, or billions of years ago. Thousands of years ago. If you're interested for me to continue this, I would love to hear from you. I will pick this up with point number 6 next time we gather, God willing, or the next time on the subject. Until then, keep looking up. Keep digging in. This provides all the truth that we need. You just have to open your minds and your hearts to receive it. Now I want to hear from you. Play a song.